Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the Spring 2021 virtual conference. I am Rachel Altum. I've been your host all week long. I am the online community manager for the Gypsy Nurse, and my co-host all week has been Steve Curtin, the CEO of the Gypsy Nurse. And I couldn't think of a better host all week. You've asked amazing questions. So thank you so much for being by my side all week.
Rachel, it has been an absolute pleasure. Even though we're not in the same location, we have definitely bonded through the virtual sessions this week. And you have done a fantastic job as we go into our last session of the week. I have to say, on behalf of the Gypsy Nurse community, thank you for doing what you have done this week. We have had some great guests, and we've got another great one coming up. But we've had some great guests, some great sessions, and you have put this whole thing together. So thank you for putting our spring virtual conference together. I know the community has really appreciated it. Your teammates have appreciated it. I've appreciated it. So fantastic job. And I can't wait to do more of these with you.
Yes, thank you so much. And just something that I want all of you to kind of take away from the week is I hope that you reach out to the people that we have presented.
You need a cup of coffee, Rachel, right?
I got it still. But I hope you reach out to them, especially the travel nurses. If you have questions, reach out to them. Even Karen provided her, she's the neurohumorist, and she provided her email. So reach out to those people, keep the conversations going. The big part of this thing, when I found these people to present, I wanted connections. So it's not just people talking at you, telling you their experience. I want you guys to become friends and all of that. So that would make my heart happy. If you made a friend in the comments or during a session, you start following someone, message them, reach out. They're all super nice people. I've seen their posts and I've spoken to them the past, 5 years since I've been here. So they're not scary people. So just want to thank all of them for joining us this week. I'd like to thank our sponsors all week long. We had AMN, Medley, Travel Nurse Across America, and Nurses 24/7. They really helped make this conference happen as well. So thank you all for your help. And I know, Steve, you have some words you would like to say as well to the community.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And just as we wrap up our week of virtual conferences, of our virtual conference here, I just want to say a couple things. Number one, I want to thank our travel nurse community, our Gypsy nurse community, for their support this entire week, and also for doing what they do as travel nurses. We all know it's been a tremendously difficult 12 months or so since the pandemic hit, and all first responders have been really under a tremendous amount of pressure, and particularly travel nurses have. So we want to thank you for what you do. Thank you for all the sacrifices you've made over the past 12 months to keep us all safe and healthy. And I hope that the next few months have better things to come for all of us, but in particular for nurses and travel nurses and first responders. In addition to that, I do want to thank our sponsors as well, Rachel, as you mentioned. We couldn't do it without their support. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to our tremendous presenters, people who have donated a lot of time over the past few days. A lot of prep work has gone into these sessions. So people that have donated their time not only to do the presentations, but also do a lot of the prep work and so forth. So I want to thank everybody for that. I would also like to remind everybody to continue to visit thegypsynurse.com for travel nursing resources and information. We've got over 170,000 jobs on the site from over 70 top agencies. We've got great articles and videos. We have housing. So if you haven't visited gypsynurse.com, please do so. All of these events are available on demand. So if you have missed any of them or joining us late today, you can go to thegypsynurse.com, go to the events page, and navigate over to the virtual event for spring 2021. And all of the events are available on demand. So please make sure to check those out. There were some wonderful ones earlier this week. So you definitely want to make sure you check that out. And again, I just want to thank everybody for their support the Gypsy nurse community, and particularly all the travel nurses out there that really that's what we're all about, are supporting travel nurses throughout their journey. And also, too, I would like to thank Tori Cochran, our next presenter, for donating her time to teach everybody. I think this is something that can, for any coffee drinkers anyway, this is going to appeal to any coffee drinkers, showing people how to brew the best cup of coffee they possibly can. So looking forward to this one, Rachel.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know a lot of the nurses call this nurse fuel. I know a lot of times coffee goes like right through their veins, and if they're lucky, they have easy to find veins. Like
Right.
you know, a lot of inside jokes today. If you know,
Yep.
you know about the vein thing.
Right.
Comment in there if you know.
Right.
Well, we have some great giveaways going on as well. Like Steve was saying, if you come to thegypsynurse.com, so here we are. You can find jobs, you can find housing, continue your education, all kinds of stuff, articles, views. But another great feature, if you register for thegypsynurse.com, you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. I'm going to let you know how you can get a double entry. So you come up here to events, which we will be having tons and tons of events throughout the year. Our next one is Nurses Week. That starts on the 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have more live events, more giveaways. It's going to be all thing Nurses Week. So we're super excited. We have details coming soon on that. So you'll be able to find Nurses Week in this events tab as well. So you're going to come down here to Spring 21 Virtual Conference. And this is where you're going to find all of our previous sessions. This is going to be here all the time. So if you want to refer back or, you know, share with anybody, you can come down here and do that. And then once you get to the bottom, you can register for the virtual conference, and you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card, which when you do this too, since the conference is basically over after this session, we'll just keep you up to date on our next conference, on Nurses Week, any live events that we have going on that you might be interested in. You'll be notified right away. You'll be the first to know. And usually we will do some sort of, you know, giveaways during those times. So you're going to be the first to know about those as well. And so for today's session, we've been giving away things, you know, every day. And for this one, we want to give you a cup of coffee, which I can't just hand you my coffee.
Right.
So we're going to give 10 nurses a cup of coffee. So comment, ask questions. You get a double entry if you tell us your coffee go-to order. So whatever your Starbucks, Bigsby, Dunkin' Donuts, coffee order, put that in there, and you'll get a double entry because we want to know. And maybe Tori might have some solutions or suggestions, not solutions.
I mean, we'd like to give our entire community, every single travel nurse that's a member of our community, you know, a cup of coffee, but that would be over 430,000, Rachel, as you well know. So our budget is a little bit limited, but I think, you know, 10 individual gift certificates is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to bring on our next presenter. She is a certified USA barista, a coffee taster's judge, which I need to find out how you become that, and a super taster Q cupper. I would like to introduce Tori Cochran to show us some coffee. Hi, Tori.
Yay, Tori.
Hello.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Yeah, as Rachel said, you're going to be talking with travel nurses or nurses in general. Coffee is known as nurses' fuel. So it's all about nurses' fuel today. And we're already starting to get some comments here from some travel nurses talking about, Ronnie says Starbucks dark roast. So we can talk about dark roasts. Reagan is saying, I'm so excited to listen to Tori. I live off of coffee. That seems to be a familiar refrain, Tori, with travel nurses. So this is going to be a much anticipated presentation.
Definitely. Wonderful. I will let you get started.
Of course. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk a little bit about coffee, and hopefully you guys can come away knowing just a little bit more, or being able to feel your obsession of coffee a little bit more after this session. We're really going to be talking about three main things. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the first, how do I choose the right coffee for my taste? How am I making sure that the coffee I bring home from my supermarket or from Starbucks is the right kind of coffee for me? Whether that be the origin, the blend, or the roast color. The secondly is going to be, how do I make sure that I'm brewing that coffee well? So that I'm brewing it, that I'm extracting it so that the farmers that actually grew that coffee, the roaster that went and roasted that coffee, and everything that they intended for you guys to actually taste, you're getting at home as you enjoy that cup of coffee. And then lastly, we'll be going into a little bit of detail. I've got just a smattering of brewing devices here. We'll talk about full immersion or pour over brewing, what works for you in the time that you have, the skill level that you want to put forth, and really the taste profile that you're looking for. So hopefully that will give you kind of a overarching theme for what we're looking at today, and you'll be able to come away with something. At the end of each kind of section, I'll pause and see if you guys have any questions. So if you have any along the way, feel free to drop it in the comments bar, and Steve is going to be kind of gathering those for us so we can discuss them. So number one, you guys may have been coffee drinkers your whole life. I mean, I remember when I first started drinking coffee, I was about 5 years old, and I was sitting at my grandparents' kitchen table, and I said, I want some of that. And my grandfather kind of laughed. He's like, okie dokie, sure, try it. So he handed it to me, and I took a sip, and I thought, ooh, no, I do not want some of that. And I kind of paused my coffee drinking until about college, when I thought, I need some of that. I've got exams, I've got finals, I've got dissertations. I need caffeine. And so I got a lot of milk-based drinks, a lot of sugar and a lot of flavor, and it was wonderful until I started my first internship. And the gentleman I was working for, he went over to the coffee area, and he said, okay, you want some coffee? I said, great. So I poured my cup of coffee, and I started to get the sugars and the creamers and everything I was going to put in. And he said, no, we don't have time for that. Like, if you're going to keep up, you got to learn to drink it black. And I thought, okay, I'll try to learn to drink it black. And over the years, as I got into the coffee industry, I realized that if you find the right coffee that works for you, a lot of times you can enjoy it black. Now, I will also say I am a fan of a hazelnut latte. So no knocking any of the milks, creamers, sugars that you guys add. But I want to make sure that you guys are starting with the right coffee base. So if you want to enjoy coffee in its form without the additions, you can do that. So when you think about coffee, we'll talk about origins, and we're going to talk about how it gets roasted and how those can play dramatically into the taste profiles that you're tasting with that coffee. So the first is going to be origin or blend. So when you think about origin, there's three large areas that you can bring coffee in from. And this is going to be an overgeneralization. I could talk for an hour simply about origins and then the different varietals and tastes that you're going to be coming in. But if you think about Asia, Indonesia, any of those kind of areas, they're going to bring and produce predominantly earthy coffees. We can talk a little bit about processing method. Indonesia does something called a wet hold processing, H-U-L-L-E-D, hold processing method, where the coffee will actually dry out on the earth. And so it tends to get a little bit more earthy. There's Sulawesi coffee. It sometimes has a bit more salty, kind of a seaweedy taste sometimes. I know that doesn't sound that good, but a lot of people really like Sulawesi coffee. If you think about your dark roast, a lot of them have a Sumatran or an Indonesian coffee blend in them, because if you roast a coffee darker, you're going to roast out some of those natural intrinsic kind of coffee flavors of it, and you're going to start to taste the roast a little more. So if you like dark coffees, if you like bold coffees, maybe look for something that is from Indonesia, Sumatra. China is really starting to come along and have a lot of Chinese blends that are coming out, single origins. That's going to give your earthy, your bold flavors. Then you think about kind of the origin of coffee. You think about Ethiopia, you think about Africa, East Africa, and most people will talk about the fruit flavors. East Africa tends to have higher citric acidity, so higher fruit flavor or flavors as in lemons, limes. Some people get black tea notes. On a lot of those are going to come from coffees that are washed coffees, which means that as the coffee is being processed, the bean is actually washed and all the cherry around it is washed off of it. The opposite of that is going to be a naturally produced coffee. And so that means that the coffee is actually dried with the cherry around it. let me take a step back and say, if you think about coffee, it grows on a tree. A tree has a bunch of cherries on it. Within those cherries are 2 coffee beans kind of on the center. And so for us to get the coffee that we drink at the end of the day, those cherries have to be picked either by hand or mechanically, brought to a washing station if it's a wash process, and all the cherry and the goop around it gets washed off, and you're left with something called parchment. Parchment holds those beans together, it protects those beans, it keeps the moisture in there, and that parchment is a lot like the parchment that you would think if you would go to a baseball game and you've got the peanuts, you break the peanut shell, and you've got kind of the red parchment around those nuts. Same kind of thing, but it's more of like a tan parchment around the coffee. It goes to a dry mill that's in country, gets to what we call a green bean, and it's just a unroasted, very hard, very dense, includes that moisture, green bean coffee that gets exported and typically roasted in its consuming country. So you have that, or it can go through a natural process where it'll actually sit on these drying beds or on the floor in the cherry. The cherry dries and shrinks around it. So it tends to have more of a fermented fruity flavor. So those flavors that come in are going to be strawberry, blueberry, plum, blackberry, all of those kind of red fruits, deep, strong fruit flavors. A lot of people will say, I do not like natural coffee. It's a diversifying kind of flavor because some people will taste it, and if something gets over naturally processed, it over ferments, it'll start to have a little bit of a vinegar taste. If you have a washed coffee, it tends to have less body or mouthfeel. Kind of, if you think about if you drink a glass of whole milk and you hold that milk on your tongue and you rub your tongue on the roof of your mouth, that viscosity that it creates, is the mouthfeel whole like whole milk, or is it really thin like water? And so if you're getting a washed coffee, it tends to have a lot of that stuff washed off. And so it tends to be a bit more thin in body, whereas some of your natural process tend to have a bit more full syrupy bodies. Now I go into a lot of that when I'm talking about Africa and kind of that producing area, because those are going to be a lot of the main countries that you're going to see natural and washed coffees coming from. So if we pick on Ethiopia, if I have a natural Ethiopia, and I think what I have here today is a washed, but this is an Ethiopian here. This is going to have kind of a cleaner mouthfeel. It's got apricot, black tea, some dried berries. It's kind of silky, clean, crisp, high note fruits. If I were to have a naturally flavored or a naturally produced Ethiopian, it's going to be more really heavy fruits, heavy body, fruit forward. So if you like fruit forward stuff, start kind of in your naturally processed coffees. Those are going to come out of Kenya, Ethiopia, Colombia, because it's the second largest producing country, has a lot of really up and coming technological ways of producing. They've got lactic acid baths that they're taking the coffee through. You've got geishas that have been spliced genetically over there that they're bringing. So Colombia is another origin that could bring about a lot of different flavors because of their processing method. But if you look at kind of Latin America, so Central and South America and its producing regions, that is going to provide you with a lot of the nutties and chocolates. So a Guatemalan huehue may be a really milk chocolate, full mouth producing coffee. A Brazilian coffee may be really nutty, like a peanut. But you can also get some of your fruit notes. They tend to be a bit more light and tropically. So let's say Costa Rica may come in with a papaya or a hit of pineapple or something like that. And so as you think about your origins, think about what you're getting from them. A lot of roasters will put tasting notes on your box. So try to pick up on, I really like that coffee, I really don't, what are things I do or don't like about it? And then kind of go with those. But if you're just starting out, think about, hey, I like bold, I like earthy, let's stick with Asian and Indonesian. I like fruit flavored, or I like really acidic, let's look at kind of African produced coffees. Or if I like chocolatey, caramels, and nutties, let's look for some Latin American produced coffee.
Tori, if I may, I don't know if you can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Just a quick question. You're mentioning coffee origins. I didn't realize. I've had the benefit of hearing you speak before about coffee. I did learn through another discussion that you had a while back that coffee did not originate from South America, correct?
So coffee originated over in Ethiopia.
Okay.
You know, whether it's folklore or factual, they talk about the Ethiopian goat herders that would take their goats up onto the mountains, and the goats would start to chew on these berries and eat them, and they excitedly jumped all over the place. So pretty much what we do after we've had our favorite cup of coffee. And so the Ethiopians took it and they thought, what's going on? Is it a part of the berry? Is it a part of the seed? And so they started the first roasting process of coffee and consumption and drinking of it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I had always, prior to listening to you speak, I had always assumed that the coffee was native to South America, and I guess it was not. So that was an interesting fact when it comes to the origin of coffee.
Well, if you think about how much coffee comes from South America, the largest producing origin is Brazil, and second is going to be Colombia. So you're making up just over 2/3 of the world's coffee production in South America right there. So that's a key reason. And then if you think about, so coffee will only grow well. I say this with a caveat that they're doing a lot of coffee growing in California right now. But typically coffee will naturally grow between the two tropics, so Capricorn and Cancer. It provides it's kind of like wine sometimes, where it needs like a good warm day, a crisp chilly night. Some of the best coffees are grown at higher altitudes. You guys have probably heard about Arabica and Robusta. What's the difference between that? Arabica tends to be known as a better coffee. You know, coffee companies will market, oh, this is 100% Arabica. The reason for that being that Arabica grows at a higher altitude. It's a little bit harder to grow. Robusta, like its name, is a more robust plant when it comes to the environment that it can be in, its ability to fight off pests and leaf rust and stuff like that. But because Arabica is grown at a higher elevation, those beans actually have a longer time to mature. So less oxygen, longer maturation period, so those beans can gather in more nutrients, more flavor profile, more complexity, and they tend to be a bit more denser bean, which is better for roasting and better for your taste palette. Robusta, actually, don't knock it, because it actually has a really good attributes that it brings in. Well, it has more caffeine. So if you're looking for the bigger hit, Robusta is going to have more caffeine than Arabica. And then also a lot of your espressos, so let's say espresso got really, really big in Italy. So if you think a lot of the espresso machines are Italian made, all of that, they actually use a good 10 to 20% in their espresso blends of Robusta, because again, the caffeine level, but also if any of you guys are espresso drinkers, that crema that you get on the top, that kind of the cream that's delicious, that comes really, really, really well from Robusta countries. And so those, again, are going to be coming. Vietnam is probably one of the biggest Robusta producing countries.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. That's my favorite part, is that creamy part on the top is the best.
Well, good. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about single origins. Well, what about blends? I love blends. I know blends get a bad name because it's like, oh, you're not touting the single origin of it's this Ethiopian or this Colombian or this Guatemalan. And I think that countries, single origins, have a lot to offer. And you can pay up for some really good coffees that are beautiful and wonderful in and of themselves. But what a lot of really good roasters and baristas have been able to do is take the best parts from different farms, different regions, different varietals, different origins, and bring them together to get you a well-balanced cup of coffee. So shameless plug, one of my favorite is Geometry. It comes from a roaster up in Northwest Arkansas, that's my hometown state. But Onyx Coffee Roasters does an amazing job of bringing together some different origins. This was actually from Ethiopia and Colombia. But the reason why I like it is because let's say you're bringing a blend. And so Brazil is typically known, it's the largest producer, but it doesn't have a lot of flavorful coffee. Very rarely will you go to a coffee shop or a supermarket and see Brazil touted as the origin blend. They're kind of known a little bit as kind of the tofu of coffee because they don't bring a lot of bad taste, but they bring body. So like if you want a full mouthfeel coffee, you need some Brazil in that blend. It brings a lot of that body. So let's say I want to use Brazil as my body booster. I want to use a Rwandan as a hit of my acidity, bring in a little bit of that lemon. And then I want to bring in an Ethiopian for my fruit, or I want to bring in a Colombian for some nut or for chocolate, or that Guatemala for that really chocolate. It gets you a rounded cup that's almost like a cultivated dessert. Like I can come in and eat fruit for my dessert, but maybe I want a little bit of cheesecake with some caramel drizzle on it and then a little bit of fruit on top. And so I feel like that's what a blend can do, is it can bring about a bunch of different origins and bring it together for a really good tasting experience. So that's origins and blends. The last thing, and probably one of the most important things, is roast color when choosing yours. Because I can take the exact same single origin, the exact same blend, and roast it to, we'll just keep it easy, to either a light or blonde, whether you know, whether you use either of those terminologies, a medium or a dark or a super dark. Any of those, and you kind of know, okay, that's what my taste buds are gonna want or need. I think that, Rachel, you may have the link to this. I'll kind of show you up here a little bit.
Yes.
This is special coffee, or sorry, the Specialty Coffee Association's original flavor wheel. I've got two links. One is an article talking about the original flavor wheel and how they've morphed into a newer flavor wheel. I think that they're both amazing resources. This is the one I'm going to use today just because I think it's an easy kind of crash course into understanding a little bit of roasting. If you guys have the link and want to click on it, great. If not, you can literally just follow along with the colors. I'm going to be talking about the yellow, the red, and the purple, just as we talk about roasting. So when you think about roasting, we talked about coffee grows on a tree, it's a cherry, it goes through some sort of processing method, whether it be dry, whether it be natural or kind of a wet process or a wash process. It gets exported and then it goes to a roaster. And what that roaster does with that coffee is very important. Coffee, if any of you guys have had a chance to see a green bean, it looks like coffee, except it's tinier, it's hard. I mean, it will literally break your tooth if you try to chew it. It smells like grain, and you don't think, wow, I really want to add milk and sugar to that and consume it, and that's going to help me get through the rest of my shift. So what roasters do to that is they take it through a roasting process. Some of them use kind of direct heat, some indirect heat. There's multiple types of roasters. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're pulling moisture out of that bean. Typically, a coffee bean gets exported around 13% moisture, and then when it gets to the States or to its consuming country, it's going to be sitting at a happy 11% moisture, something like that. That's important because if you want to sound really silly / snobby when you go to your next roaster, you know, sometimes you can go in and say, what is your freshest roasted coffee and this and that. You could go in and say, well, what is your most recently harvested coffee? Because if coffee starts to get dry and starts to get old even before it gets roasted, it loses that moisture and it literally starts tasting like a brown paper bag. When you think about coffee being stored in its green form, the most important thing is the moisture content of that bean staying there, staying intact until it gets roasted. Because as it gets roasted, it starts to lose that moisture and expand and blow up almost like a kernel of corn when you're popping popcorn. And as you're roasting, there's first crack. You'll hear literally, it sounds like popping popcorn in your roaster. And if you go long enough, you'll hit a second crack where you're starting to lose really organic matter of that coffee. So as you start to lose moisture, as it starts to blow up, it goes through, really we'll talk about three kind of stages that produce different tasting notes. So enzymatic is the first. So when you think about a blonde roast, a light roast, a lot of breakfast blends are very light roasted. So those tend to have that zing of acidity on the back of your tongue. Like you take a sip and you're like, whoa, like, you know, people love it, they hate it, they have an opinion about it, like they like that coffee. That's your light roast. In the enzymatic phase, you typically have a thinner body. You haven't roasted it long enough to have a really full body. You have high acidity, and you tend to have your enzymatic tasting. So your herbaceous, your florals, a little bit of your citric fruits. As you continue roasting and you get into the next stage, which is this red stage right here, sugar browning, that's when the caramelization of the coffee starts to come in. So you have your sugar browning that causes nutty, it causes caramely, it causes your chocolates. If you want a bright coffee, get light. If you want like a good medium roast that's going to work well with, you know, some milk, some sugar, it's going to have a lot of those sweet notes that get brought in. That doesn't mean that it's not going to have the enzymatic notes. It just adds the complexity of adding some of those sugar browning sweet notes over it. And then once you start getting to dry distillation, that's when you get kind of your spicy, your carbonic, your really roasty flavors. You heard me talk a little bit about second crack. That is literally you're starting to lose some organic matter. If you have a very light roast, you can get into underdevelopment. So that's when it starts to taste a little sour, almost too bright. If you have a very, very dark roast that has not been, you can have very good dark roast, but let's say it hasn't been managed well, you can destroy so much of that organic matter that you're just tasting the roast level no longer. It doesn't matter if you took a beautiful, fruity, natural Ethiopian and a very earthy Sumatran, you roast it dark enough, it's going to taste pretty much the same. So in knowing that, that's very important of knowing which roast color you like. The darker you roast the coffee, the more you're going to build the body. The lighter, the more you're going to have a nippy acidity, but it's going to have a lower acidity. A higher acidity. Darker, lower acidity, big body. And again, there is a myriad of different roast colors in all of this. And so you can have everything from a blonde, a light, a medium, a dark, and you're going to be able to have different levels of complexity and flavor in there. Personally, I tend to like a medium to a medium dark. You have the third wave roasters and even fourth wave roasters that have come through. And one of the big pushes that they've done is to almost roast it so light to prove the integrity of the coffee that they are sourcing. What that means is, I think Rachel mentioned earlier that I'm a Q certified cupper. What that means is it's essentially the sommelier of the coffee industry. So I can be paid to rate and score and cup green coffee from the States and then assign a value monetarily of how much that differential or how much that coffee can sell on the open market. So it's a universal cupping standard so that people, let's say a farmer in Guatemala, an importer in the UK, a trader in New York, a roaster down in Arkansas can all follow the exact same timed and calculated procedure to say, if you tell me that this should score an 84, I'm scoring it an 84 type thing. So it's kind of, it monetizes coffee. But as you're able to kind of go through and taste a lot of those, a lot of roasters have come through and said, hey, like when we taste the coffee, we roast it really light because we want to see if there's any defects or off flavors in that may show up as you roast it a little bit darker or even very dark. And so roasters have kind of caught on to that and thought, okay, I'm going to go and roast this really light and do that so that I can prove that the integrity of my supply chain and the coffee I have has no defects in it. And that's great. Again, if you love a very bright coffee, that's what you're going to get in very light. I love breakfast buns in the morning because I need that little bit of zip after my kids have been up 4, 5, 6 times that night. Or have you guys have worked double shift or something, you may need a little bit of that zip. But yeah, I like the sugar browning phase is a good phase for me. One last thing to note on roast, and then we are going to move into extraction, is going to be if you like to add a lot of cream and sugar, it's better to get darker coffees. So a lighter coffee or even a medium coffee, when you add any sort of milk and sugar on it, can muddle and cover a lot of the coffee taste so that you're just getting the bright kind of nippy part of that coffee, not like a holistic good coffee flavor. So if you do like to add a lot of sugar or milk or even a little bit, I'd recommend a medium dark to a darker coffee for that.
Tori, I'd like to take this opportunity. We're getting a lot of questions and comments, which is awesome. So I want to, before we segue into the extraction, I do want to ask a couple of questions here from our audience. Ronnie asks, is the caffeine content of dark, blonde, and light roast the same? Interesting question.
So the easy answer is yes. I mean, you will have marketing terms to say, again, more of that coffee is intact, so at a lighter roast. So technically, more of the caffeine contents have not been broken down at a lighter roast. So I'm not saying any company that is out there marketing that blonde roasts are going to have more caffeine than your dark roast. It comes down to minute destruction of organic matter in that caffeine content. It's not even going to be remotely registerable. Unlike if you have an Arabica and a Robusta, Robusta has almost double the content of caffeine than an Arabica varietal.
Okay. All right. And so Reagan's making a statement here. She's a coffee drinker. She's saying Kona is my all-time favorite. What is Kona?
So Kona is a small producing part of Hawaii. Kona, so Kona can actually command a very high price. If you're thinking about Kona coffee right now in the market, for a pound of green coffee of Kona, it is close to $200 a pound in some cases, and then sometimes it can fluctuate down to $125 or something. So it tends to be a very expensive coffee because of the variety. Yeah, because of the varietal that it is, it tends to be a bit earthy, sometimes say a bit grassy. You can get a little bit of fruit notes in there. One thing to note is if you're buying coffee that doesn't say 100% Kona, and most of the 100% Kona actually comes from Hawaiian coffee roasters a lot of time because they're not paying for $200 a pound, so they can actually get their own coffee, roast it, and sell in the market. Most U.S. companies, unless it says 100% Kona, legally it's 10% Kona. So typically you're drinking a 10% Kona. Predominantly it's a Colombian mixture, so 90% Colombian. So if yours doesn't say 100%, maybe you like Colombian too. Some people will buffer in some Brazilian coffee in there. Same with like a Jamaican Blue Mountain. That's also a coffee that people love. Both of those are really well marketed terms and really well marketed coffees. But I, in particular, I really like a good cup of Kona. It's hard to find like a good 100% Kona coffee out there. But when you do, it's delicious.
Says like Reagan has expensive taste. All right. We're getting, let me see here. Lisa says, sounds like an 80s group. Lisa says blonde roast with cinnamon and vanilla. That's her go-to coffee. Rachel, who we know is a coffee drinker, she likes this, mix of putting everything into it. She iced white chocolate mocha with almond milk and cold foam, or white tiramisu latte. So that is not your straightforward, I'll have cream and sugar, right? Katia says, I love coffee and my favorite is Costa Rican.
Awesome.
So there you go there. Tony says, I love anything mocha, but in the winter, I love peppermint. All right. Diane.
Mocha in the winter then.
What's that?
I said probably a good peppermint mocha in the winter.
Yeah. Diane says, I love Death Wish coffee. I don't know what that is, Tori, so you're going to have to explain that one to me.
Death Wish is a brand of coffee. It's a roaster out there, and they make some really good coffee. Typically, depending on which blend you have, they tend to roast a little bit darker coffee, a little bit bolder coffee, and it packs a punch. It will keep you awake.
Sounds like it. It sounds like keep you awake for months. Shannon says, here's my favorite coffee recipe. Vanilla sweet cream cold brew with a vanilla sweet cream foam topping. Then add some caramel drizzle and 2 pumps of espresso. You won't regret it. Wow, Shannon, this is like nuclear science here with Shannon's comment. You have to have a recipe book for that one.
Exactly. I mean, we should gather up the recipes after this.
My goodness. Rachel has posted the links to the coffee wheel so everybody can see it. Let me see another couple of quick ones here before we move on to the extraction. But Courtney says, my go-to is either the pistachio latte, if they have it, or cappuccino with almond milk. Almond milk's getting very popular these days. And Kathy, so going back to Kona, Kathy says, so if Kona is my favorite, what is a cheaper alternative with the same flavor profile? It sounds like my kind of person. She's looking for that. I don't want to spend too much here. How can I get Kona on a budget, right? Or what's similar?
So let's say, if you like our darker roasted Kona, maybe try to get into some of the Indonesian Sumatrans out there. It's still an expensive coffee, but when I say expensive, it's like $3 a pound versus a Brazil that may be $1 a pound or something. And this is, again, green coffee coming out of origin pricing there. But kind of look at some of the Indonesian coffees. I mentioned Sulawesi earlier. That may have some of kind of when I say grassy, I'm not saying that, like when I talk about certain tasting aspects and stuff, some people are like, I don't like grassy coffee. But some of those really kind of in-depth taste notes of the way it's processed kind of has some of those vegetal flavors. If you like more of a medium roast, maybe look at Colombia. Colombia is going to have some of those notes as well. It may be a little bit more nutty than some of the Konas, but I definitely start there and then maybe branch out to like a Peru or Peruvian coffee.
Okay. So one last question from me before you move on to the extraction. Just reading about, coffee over the years, and just with all the discussion about health and, those sorts of things, people trying to eat better. Is coffee healthy for you? I know it's probably not if you're following some of these recipes that people are advising on in terms of caramel and extra sugar and cream and all that stuff. But generally speaking, Tori, from your expertise, does coffee in and of itself have health benefits, or is it kind of neutral?
It's like anything. In excess, it's probably going to be bad for you. So I don't, now I've done it before and I can't say I will ever stop, but I don't recommend going and just taking a pot of coffee down 3 times a day type thing. But if you guys are interested in seeing some of the health benefits, the NCA, or the National Coffee Association, they're the world leading researcher of kind of coffee benefits on, they've done studies on diabetes, they've done heart studies and how it can be beneficial for your heart health. The one negative thing that they've come out with, and you guys have probably heard about it with like some of the keto coffees and the clean coffees and stuff, is they talk about, we'll be getting into like a full immersion coffee that actually doesn't have a paper or something to kind of strain through it. Some of that cholesterol of that coffee is going to get through. It won't be strained out like it would in the paper filters. And so they'll say, if you have cholesterol problems or you're worried about them, maybe stay away from a French press or consult your doctor. And then people talk about the washed coffee versus the natural. Washing the coffee is so much better for your health versus having it naturally dried with that. That gets back into the cholesterol, but there's been much less conclusive studies. I think that is more of a marketing by washed coffee type thing. So in my opinion, as an avid coffee drinker and in the industry, I think that non-excess coffee does not, there's a lot of health benefits from it.
Moderation is the key, right? All right. And that was the national, if anybody ever wanted to delve into that, it's the National Coffee Association.
Yes, NCA, and you'll get all these basketball things, so just, get ready for it. But after that, just search National Coffee Association.
Very cool. All right. So now we've got some comments, we had some questions, which is great. Now we move into the extraction, the actual making of the cup of coffee, right?
Yes. So when you think about, no matter how you have your coffee, espresso, a pour over method, a drip brewer like I have back here, K-cups, whatever it is, it comes down to extraction. And when I say extraction, I mean when you have your coffee right here, you're not drinking all of this. You'll notice as you either pour your water through, plunge your water, drain your water through, you're left with a lot of organic matter left in there. You have the coffee grounds that you have to throw out afterward. So typically, on average, to get a good cup of coffee, you're only extracting 18 to 22% of the coffee. That's what you're drinking, 18 to 22%. So if you are, so that means, let's say if you got 20% of coffee in there, you've got 80% of water that you're drinking. So making sure that you're starting out with a good water is really important, because if you've got, like we're on well water out here in the boonies, and so if our water can kind of get off, then our coffee starts tasting weird because it's not extracting well. We in the industry, this is, you know, quirky, but we'll say like H2OMG. I know it's really getting nerdy here, but like H2O is water and MG is magnesium. And magnesium in coffee is the biggest thing that's going to extract your coffee well. And so you can just remember that, like H2OMG. If you don't like the water that you have, third wave water, yeah, I'll put it out here. These are just like water supplements. You can add 1 packet of this into a gallon of just filtered water. Shake it well, brew coffee. I mean, you've got a gallon worth of water. You can just buy one of those filtered water gallons at home. Again, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal. If you want to get super sciencey about it, you can get this, and it will improve a lot of the taste of your coffee. But it's not necessary by any means. So without actually controlling the water, there are 4 things that go into how your coffee is brewed and making sure it's brewed well. So the first is going to be temperature. What is the temperature of your water? The second is going to be how long do you brew it? And that is really kind of fully dependent on what is your third thing, grind size used. And then one thing that we'll touch on a little bit, but not a lot, is like, what is the turbidity? The turbidity is going to take care of itself in your brewing method. So again, we'll touch on that predominantly with the French brew. I'm sorry, the French press. So an MIT grad back in the 50s, his name is E. Lockhart. He actually went through and he developed something, the golden brew, or the golden cup. And he did extensive studies on, and this is just for the US palate. So he did another one for Norway and Sweden. He did another one for different areas. But if you look at the American palate and what they're used to, what they enjoy, what they're tasting, that's where the 18 to 22% extraction comes from. Because let's say I brew really fast and don't extract everything, I could get something less than 18%. It's going to taste sour, it's going to taste floral. Or let's say I let my coffee steep and sit for way too long and it starts to over extract to maybe like 30%. It'll still taste like coffee, but it's going to be really bitter and almost too strong. So he came in and he pretty much said, okay, you can have a high brew ratio, which is essentially too much coffee. And so the way to know you've used too much coffee or your grind is off or something like that, it has like a chewy, thick mouthfeel. It kind of muddles those flavors together. So instead of tasting like a nutty peanut and a bright lemon and a sweet papaya, everything kind of gets muddled, mushed together because it's over extracted those flavors. And then the last thing is it's almost like a pungent aromatic. Like the smell of it is very strong. On the inverse of that, having a low brew ratio or having too little coffee, or having a grind that under extracts is going to have that like watery, thin mouthfeel. Let me start my water kettle as I'm saying this. It's going to have like very weak, watery flavors and just like a faint aroma. So we'll kind of get into those as we go through these 4 things. So time, temperature, grind size, and turbidity. So let's knock out temperature first because we're essentially going to be using the same temperature for all of these. Typically around 200 degrees is what you're going to be looking for. I've got a kettle back here that's actually got a temperature on it. So I can set it to exactly 200 degrees. It'll shut off when it's done. It'll either maintain that temp or start to fall. If you don't have one of those, I'd say try to catch it a minute before it boils. Again, you want to get really nerdy. Once the water starts to boil, it'll change some of the polarity of that water and remain that way for a little while so that when you're actually extracting your coffee, it polarizes some of that and it won't extract as well. So if you can catch it before it boils, that's ideal. Again, if you don't, still going to taste delicious. So for our temp, we're just going to stick with 200. You can do cold brew coffees. If you think about a cold brew, because you are brewing at such a cold temperature, the time it takes to brew is so much longer. Now, I know a lot of people out there like to brew a hot cup of coffee, throw it in the fridge, throw it over some ice. And that makes a good iced coffee. But what it also does is it brings out a lot of, there's something called like guanic acid in coffee. And as it sits and gets older, it gets more bitter. Or if it gets cold like that, it breaks some bonds and gets really bitter. So a lot of times if you're doing an iced coffee with some milk additive, sugar additive, you're not really gonna taste the difference. But if you're just doing a straight iced coffee, it's gonna taste a lot more astringent and bitter if you're brewing it a hot way and then cooling it down.
So, Tori, just to make sure that I understand, and other people may have this question as well, there is a difference between cold brew and iced coffee.
Correct. So cold brew it's a very long brewing process. You may have seen it with one of your fancy roasters. They've got these large brewers that come in from Japan. You've got ice water that sits here and drips like once every 10 seconds, 4 seconds, slowly saturates, slowly extracts. And so you can have a much more mellow cup. It's not as astringent, it's not as bitter. And that's how a lot of the cold brews are made. I don't have the time or the machinery here to show you cold brew. But that's a temperature thing. So the colder it is, the longer you're going to brew it. Today, everything's going to be at 200 degrees. And so most of your brewing methods at home, I'd say stick around 200 degrees. So that's your temperature version of it. So time and grind size really kind of work together. If you think about just the surface area of the grind of your coffee, think about it in terms of sand or in terms of like large boulders sort of thing. One of a finer grinds is going to be an espresso grind. If you think you go to a coffee shop or do an espresso maker at home, you pop it in there, it's pressurized, you got a certain amount of grams you've got there, it's going to drip, it's going to produce your espresso in 20 to 30 seconds. That is very fine because you want to be able to extract your 18 to 20% of extractable coffee in those 20 to 30 seconds. So very fine grind, a lot of surface area of that coffee, so that as it comes through and touches it and extracts it, it's going to extract quickly. If you think about our only full immersion, what I mean by full immersion on this table is that the coffee here, I've got my French press. The coffee is going to go into the bottom of it. I'm going to take water, pour it over it, fully immerse the coffee into it, and it's going to sit there for a little while. This is going to have the coarsest grind on the table. Typically your French press, and I'll go into this if you guys want to take notes later, but it's about a 4-minute brew. So that coffee contact time, it's not 20 seconds like an espresso, it is a full 4 minutes. So this tends to be more of a coarse grind. And again, if it's too finely ground, you're going to end up with really over-extracted bitter coffee. So that kind of gets into your grind size. So the longer your time of contact between water and your grind, the coarser. The shorter, let's say on both of these pour over methods, you've got a Chemex here and you've got a V60 pour over here. You're going to be pouring coffee around it. It's going to be flowing through just like on your drip grinder here. You're just doing it manually here and you're doing it electronically here. Those are going to have kind of a faster contact time. So this is going to be not as fine as an espresso grind, a little bit more of like a medium grind. If you think about what stales coffee, if you want fresh coffee, the leading staler of coffee is oxygen. Coffee, when you buy it at a store, most roasters will flush or like inject nitrogen into your coffee because it's an inert gas. It doesn't do anything, doesn't hurt anything, but it flushes out that oxygen. And then as coffee, because it's been roasted, it releases CO2. As it continues to release that, as it sits in your bag, the nitrogen will kind of continue to flush that out. So if you're thinking about, if I want to have fresh coffee, buy it whole bean. Whole bean has less surface area, so there's not as much oxygen able to touch it and stale that bean, versus if you buy ground coffee, again, a lot of surface area, tiny particles, it can stale a lot faster. If you've got a grinder at home, you can just kind of play with the settings. Again, I'd start coarse here. If you don't feel like you're getting as much of a bang for your buck and flavor, try taking it a little bit finer. I start medium here. And again, if you have an espresso grinder at home, an espresso machine at home, typically you'll have an espresso grinder that goes with that because you'll hear people talk about burr grinders and a bunch of different conical or spherical and all of that. the biggest thing is just making sure that you have all the same size grind. And that's what a burr grinder will do for you. It's just like throwing, let's say you had a really thick steak and a really thin steak, and a medium steak grill. They're all going to kind of cook at different times. Same with coffee beans. If you had a bunch of different sized particles from your grind, they're going to extract at different rates. And so you won't have a consistent extraction from there. Okay, so those are the 4 things we're going to be looking at. I'd love to hop in and talk about some of the methods here. Steve, did you have any questions about those 4 things that we're going to be looking at to extract good coffee?
Well, is any one of them any better than the other one, or is it all personal preference? You know, are any of the methods just personal preference?
So a lot of them come down to personal preference. I mean, really. So you're low, let's say the easiest thing to do and the least skill level, to sit there and monitor it and make sure all that obviously going to be your brewer or your single serve machine. You know, the whole got Keurigs coming out, and sorry, it's a habit of mine to say single serve, but single serve is the K cup or Keurig. But so this machine, because you just pop a cup in, close it, brew your cup of coffee. The reason why I had this out today is not to show you how to do it, because I think you all know how to brew a single serve cup of coffee. But I think if your hospitals or stations or anything like ours here, a lot of them have these single serve machines. A lot of them have Keurigs now. Some of them are still on the liquid coffee, large brewing machines, but a lot of them have these. For 12 years, I worked at a company that was one of the leading manufacturers of single serve or K cups. And every single one, it doesn't matter if it's dark, light, medium, single origin blend, whatever it is, they are made for an 8-ounce brew. The amount of grams that they put in there, anywhere from 8 grams all the way up to, I've seen some at like 12.5 grams per cup now. Those are all ground and put in there to make an 8-ounce brew. That's what their tasters have done, all of that. So a lot of people go in and think, oh, I want a smaller cup of coffee, or I don't want it to be as strong, so I'm going to do a 6-ounce brew. And that's great, except just like with the roasting, if you under extract, you get kind of stuck in this enzymatic area. So maybe that 6-ounce brew is going to bring more of the floral notes and more of the high notes there. Whereas the full cup of coffee may have more sweetness or sugar browning. The 8-ounce is going to be kind of what they've configured it for. And then again, if you go all the way, I think it goes to 10, and some of them even have a 12-ounce now. It's the same grams in that cup of coffee. It's just going to keep running through water and keep extracting. And so it's going to start to over extract. And so it's going to get really bitter, harsh. The bitter part of your tongue is on the very back. You're going to get some tannins in there that are a bit more harsh. And again, it comes down to your taste buds. I mean, my grandparents were raised on Folgers. That's what they love. That's what they always drank. And so Folgers is an Arabica Robusta blend. Robusta, because of the way it's a varietal it is naturally bitter. You can't even make a Arabica varietal taste like Robusta's bitterness. And so it really comes down to what you like and what you want, what you're looking for. So again, easiest are going to be these 2. You guys heard me talk about filters. I got 2 different types of filters here. I've got a natural brown paper filter here, and then I have a bleached white filter. If you're more conscious about the environment, then you probably want to go with the more natural brown. This, if you want to get into like coffee connoisseur people will start to say you do get a bit of a papery flavor from this, whereas you won't get that from the bleached. So it comes down to what you're valuing at that point. But this will strain out some of those, again, cholesterols in the coffee. And so it's going to have more of a clean finish, not a full silky mouth. Whereas if you really like that body, you like your coffee to be chewy in a way that like it's really there, a French press or a full immersion brew is probably something that you want to choose.
Tori, whatever happened? I'm a child of the 70s, and you talked about Folgers and what have you. Whatever happened to the old percolators? I remember those growing up. My parents used to use the old, aluminum percolator. Whatever happened to those? They've been phased out because they made horrible cups of coffee, or whatever happened to that method of brewing?
So they weren't that consistent, if you think about it. You may not get this consistent brew, but they were also phased out because brewers came in. Brewers were easier to clean. Brewers were easier to maintain, a little bit more consistent. A lot of large event centers still use percolators because you can brew massive amounts of coffee in a percolator in the way that it works. But if you think about it, sometimes that coffee can sit there for too long and get too bitter in a percolator.
Yeah. If you got to scrape your coffee out with a spoon, you know it's been sitting around for too long, right? So one quick question here. We talk about brewing methods, and Kathy's using a brand name, but Kathy asks, is there a reason coffee from Nespresso would taste better than other methods? And it's probably not just because George Clooney made it, right? Is there a reason behind that those mechanics that make that, Nespresso a better cup of coffee?
Yes, so espresso is, again, it comes down to a lot of preference. So what Nespresso's been able to do, so if you think about a Keurig machine, you're literally just recreating a brewed filter cup of coffee on a very tiny little scale. It's got if you were to ever open up your cup, you've got the foil lid on the top, you've got coffee that sits in there, it sits in a little tiny brew basket of a filter paper, and then you have the plastic that kind of gives it some molding to sit in your cup. You're brewing a cup of coffee. What Nespresso actually does is it recreates an espresso shot. So it's a much more concentrated cup of coffee, and it's doing it through, I'm totally blanking on the word. It's doing it through kind of I don't want to say like freeze-dried coffee, but essentially what it does is it goes through a process, and unlike this, that you're left with coffee that's going to be left in here that you've got to throw out. They've taken all of the coffee and they've made it fully extractable. You can essentially take that pod, cut it open, dump it, stir it in there, and that's your coffee. Instant, that's the word. So if you think about a lot of other countries, they've actually got cans of instant coffee, and they've been able to do it. There's a lot of really good roasters out there that are coming out with like really good cups of instant coffee. They're fighting years and years of generations of instant coffee equals bad coffee, because a lot of times it was the cheap coffee of the past. But you can get some really good instant coffee, and that's what Nespresso does. Is it goes through a freeze-dried formulation it extracts the coffee, it gets all the good parts, and then you're essentially brewing that entire thing into your cup, almost like dumping some hot chocolate, adding milk, and stirring it up, versus extracting like any of these other processes. So if you like espresso-based beverages, it's going to taste like an espresso-based beverage more than it will a brewed cup of coffee.
Got it. Well, in the last couple of minutes here, Tori, so we've got a huge audience of travel nurses, and the vast majority of them seem like they like coffee. It's obviously kind of, not only do they enjoy the taste of coffee, but also too, it kind of gives them some fuel to get the day going, or the night going for that matter. So in terms of takeaways, if you're to give advice to a travel nurse, and let's just say this scenario is this travel nurse is going out on assignment, they are by themselves, they are in a place where they can make coffee in an apartment or some sort of rented facility. They've got a little bit of money to spend. They don't want to spend too much money, but they want to get a nice personalized coffee machine. They want to buy some good coffee, and they're probably going to be going to the local grocery store or what have you, and they're going to be brewing a cup of coffee for themselves every day before they go to work or after work. What would you suggest in terms of coffee that's available at the grocery store, ground versus whole bean, some sort of machine that's reasonably priced that they can grab while on assignment, and just kind of a generalized brewing method? What would you give them as a takeaway in terms of advice? Travel nurse wants to make a great cup of coffee on their own. What do you say?
Yes. Okay. So we talked about the extraction. The biggest number to take away, and let's just all start with the easy one, 1 to 15. Your options are 1 to 15, 1 to 16, 1 to 17. At my house, I typically use 1 to 16 because that's how I like, and you don't know what that means yet. That's how I like my coffee, is 1 to 16. But 1 to 15 means that for every gram of coffee, 1 gram of coffee, I'm going to use 15 grams of water. I say that's the easiest because, like, on this one, if I use 20 grams of coffee, which will make me like a single cup of coffee, I'm going to use 300 grams of water. If I am making Chemex, and so this is going to make a bunch of coffee for a couple people, let's say I triple that and I use 60 grams of coffee, I'm going to use 900 grams of water. This guy's a little bit different, and we didn't really get into him, but this is a pretty set ratio in that for each cup, you're going to use 20 grams of coffee, 300 grams of water. So same over here. The only thing over here is you're going to put this in, pour the water over it, let it sit for about 30 seconds. We talked about turbidity. That's like how much the water is moving around the coffee. Because the water's not moving, you create that turbidity by pushing the grounds down just a little bit, and then plunging that at 4 minutes. You're going to want to drink this one immediately because it'll keep extracting. That coffee is still sitting at the bottom. The water's still touching it. It's going to keep extracting. It's going to get more bitter as it sits there. But, knowing what your ratio is. Maybe that 15 to 1, that's the easy one to remember. 16 to 1, that's a pretty in between. If you like more of like a bold coffee, the boldest is going to be the 15 to 1 because you have
15 to 1. Okay.
If you want like not as bold, it's too bold of a coffee for you, maybe move to 1 to 17 kind of ratio. Mm-hmm. But I'd stick within those parameters. If you don't have a scale, and I have a couple different scales here, typically the good rule is 2 tablespoons of coffee for 6 ounces of water. So that's a good way to eyeball it if you don't have a scale with you. Again, we didn't get to brewing these. This guy, we talked about the grind size. This guy should brew in about 3 minutes. So if it's brewing in more than 3 minutes, if it's taking too long, your grind is too coarse. I'm saying fine. It's like sand and it's trapping all of that water and it's too fine. You need to take a little bit coarser. If it's going too fast, it's like pebble, rocks, too big, too coarse, take a little finer. This guy should take about 6 minutes to brew. This is a 4-minute brew. And for you travelers out there, this is actually my little setup. When I travel, I've got an itty bitty little tiny scale. So that comes with me.
Very cool.
I've got this collapsible pour over. So it's exactly like this, but it collapses all the way down. Easy to pop up. Usually where you are will have some sort of cup, so you just pop that on there. And then these tiny little filters right here go through. If you don't have a grinder at home, most grocery stores will grind your coffee for you. If not, you can find your favorite local roaster. They'll grind it. Make sure you tell them how you're preparing this. I'm going to do French brew. They'll know what grind to do it on. I'm going to do a pour over. I'm going to do a brew, just using a brewer at my house. They're going to know what grind and extraction that is, and then just kind of feel your own taste. If it's too bitter, you're over extracting. It's too fine. If it's too florally, not strong enough, it's probably too coarse. You need to take that a little bit more. And this book pretty much talks about everything I've talked about and more. I can get a link out to Rachel.
Definitely.
It is called Craft Coffee and Manual. And Jessica Eastoe wrote this, and it's great. It's everything that you could ever want to know about brewing good coffee in all of these methods. So if there's one that you really want to get into, this is a great book to have at home.
Cool.
That is awesome. Tori, where can you get the that collapsible filter unit is really cool. Where can somebody get that? The one you have on top of your coffee cup?
Oh, the ever elusive Amazon. So this doesn't even have a brand on it. That's how fancy it is. It's just a silicone collapsible pour over is what you're going to want to search. V60 was like the original brand, or that's the size V60. But they come in different colors, different brands.
Cool.
That's it.
Very neat. Talk about for convenient for traveling. That's really cool. Basically a self-contained kit that makes a great cup of coffee.
Definitely. I mean, literally, I can have this guy, and then as long as I have access to water, I've not been able to find a collapsible kettle yet. I'm sure they have them. Maybe
they might.
But you can just take your regular coffee brewer or boil water over the stove, or if you have an Instaheat, anything like that to get your hot water. So literally, you get this, you get your coffee, you're good to go.
Fantastic. Well, Tori, this has been a great session. I learned a lot. I'm dying for a cup of coffee right now, so you've got me thinking here. But this has really been really informative. We're getting some great comments. To close it out here, Lisa says she's on the road. She says, I take my coffee bag and my grinder French press, electric tea kettle, pour over, filters. There you go, right? She sounds like she knows what she's doing. But no, this has been a great session, great information, and again, coffee, I don't know, I'm going to guess, not scientific, probably 90% of travel nurses out there drink coffee, and they kind of need it to get them through the day with all the difficult hours that they work. So this is really helpful. So Tori Cochran, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. This was great. And this was a great way to wrap up our virtual conference this week. So thank you for donating your time to our travel nursing community. This is great.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. And to all of you out there, I know Steve already said this, but thank you for what you do. I mean, you are getting us through this. So hopefully today you got to learn a little bit about how coffee can keep you awake while you do it.
Well, thank you, Tori. We'd love to have you back again. This is great. We'll have to do it again sometime over the next few months.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tori.
All right. Yeah, I know I want more coffee.
That was great. I'm drooling now, particularly, but we've got some expensive taste here with Kona, and then we've got some of the drizzles and caramel and all that stuff. I personally like just that little cream and sugar. That's my cup, but everybody's different, right?
Well, I think you got to find the right coffee, because I was always like frappuccinos and all that sugar. And then I finally found one that's like a creme brulee, kind of coffee. And I can drink that one just straight. So I think you just got to find the right one, and then you can drink it.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Rachel, again, this is a great way to end the day and end the conference. I hope that everybody that has joined us over the past 5 days has found our presentations to be helpful and interesting and entertaining. We look forward to doing more live events. Visit thegypsynurse.com for a list of our live events coming up. We'll be doing many of them over the next few months, and then we are planning a fall conference as well with even more guests and surprises. So look forward to that, and I hope that everybody has enjoyed all of the information that we've brought to them. And Rachel, thank you for everything you have done, not only over the past week, but also the past few months to put this together. I think our travel nursing community really appreciates it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm so glad that everyone seemed to love it. And be on a lookout for those that did register for the gypsynurse.com. We'll be putting out a post survey email, and so you can tell us what you liked the best, what you think would be better. We want to know from you. When we first started, we put a survey out. We wanted to know what you wanted to learn about, and I think we covered pretty much all the hot topics that was on this survey. There was one, traveling with children, which we didn't get to do, so we will definitely have either a separate session like that coming up or in our fall conference, so be sure to check that out, and we will keep you updated on all of our live events. We're super excited. We want to keep you all educated. We would love to do this in person. I know we used to have them in person all the time, but with this day and age, we kind of have to go virtual. So
someday we'll be back on the road again, Rachel.
Yes.
Someday we'll be back on the road again. But thank you to our entire travel nursing community. Thank you for all that you do for us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.
Yes, thank you.